Culture drives behavior, and behavior drives results. It sounds simple, but it's the heartbeat of any hyper-forming organization. Culture is not a mission statement on the wall or the list of values printed in your company handbook. It's not Friday happy hours or beanbags in the office. Culture is what your people do when you're not watching. It's how they treat one another, how they approach their work, how they speak about the company when things are going well and when they aren't. And all of that shows up in your results. Every business result, good or bad, is a product of repeated behaviors, and every repeated behavior comes from a belief system, a shared understanding of how things are done here. That's culture. You cannot afford to ignore it. If you're not actively shaping your culture as a leader, then someone else is, and usually it's your lowest performers or the loudest voices in the room. That's not leadership, that's abdication. You don't get the culture you write down, you get the culture you reinforce. That means culture is built through the systems you design, the conversations you have, the people you promote, and the standards you keep even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, think about that for a second every time you let a former stay because they're nice or they've been here a long time. You just taught your team what matters most. You reinforced the culture, just not the one you wanted. The reality is that culture and performance aren't separate, they're deeply connected. If you want better performance, start with culture, but here's where most leaders go wrong. They treat culture like a side project. They say, we'll fix the culture after we hit our numbers. But that's backwards. The culture you build is what gets you the numbers. People don't perform for paychecks alone. They perform for leaders they believe in, for missions that matter, and for teams that challenge them to be better. That's culture. When you walk into a high-performance culture, you can feel it. It's in the energy. It's in the way meetings start on time, the way feedback is delivered directly but respectfully, and the way wins are celebrated and failures are owned. People don't wait to be told what to do. They take ownership. They think like owners. That behavior doesn't happen by accident. It happens because the culture demands it. And when that behavior becomes the norm, the results follow. As a leader, your job is to connect the dots between what you believe, what you say, what you do, and what your team experiences. Alignment. You don't get to say you value excellence but tolerate mediocrity. You don't get to claim transparency but avoid hard conversations. People are watching. Your team notices what you celebrate, what you ignore, what you excuse. That's where your culture lives, not in what you say, but in what you allow. So if you're not getting the results you want, don't start with strategy, start with culture. Ask yourself, what behaviors are driving these results and what beliefs are driving those behaviors? Then ask, how did we get here and what are we reinforcing that needs to change? That's leadership, and that's where the work begins. Changing culture doesn't happen overnight, but it happens faster than you think when you get intentional. Set clear expectations, follow through, celebrate what's right. Address what isn't and do it consistently. The team will follow your lead, always. You can't coach culture in a meeting and then contradict it in a hallway conversation. You don't need a culture committee. You need leadership consistency. You need managers who model the behavior and systems that back them up. If behavior drives results, then every result in your business is a reflection of your culture, good or bad. Own that, don't run from it, use it. You have the power to shape that culture every day by what you model, what you say, what you measure, and what you allow. Because when you create a culture that drives the right behaviors, the results take care of themselves. Performance is not the enemy of empathy. That's one of the biggest mindset shifts modern leaders need to make. Somewhere along the way, a false choice emerged as if you can either be a kind, compassionate leader or a strong, performance-driven one, but not both. That's outdated. In today's world, the most effective leaders understand how to blend empathy with accountability. Not only can you have both, you must have both if you want to build a sustainable, hyper-forming team. Let's be clear, empathy doesn't mean lowering the bar. It doesn't mean making excuses or avoiding difficult conversations. It means seeing your people as humans first, understanding what motivates them, what challenges they face, and how you can support them in delivering at their highest level. That support doesn't mean carrying their work or shielding them from expectations. It means giving them the clarity, tools, and coaching to meet those expectations. That's what real empathy looks like in leadership. The problem is, most leaders overcorrect in one direction. They either lead with empathy and drop the ball on standards, or they push performance and burn out their people. Neither works long term. Empathy without standards creates comfort without growth. Performance without empathy creates pressure without purpose. But when you lead with both, you get teams that feel seen, challenged, and motivated. That's where real growth happens, when people know you care and you expect more from them. So, how do you lead with empathy while driving performance? Start by listening, really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk. Understand what's actually going on with your team. Ask questions like, what's getting in the way of your success? Or what do you need to perform at your best? That kind of dialogue shows your team you care about them, not just their output. But here's the key: you don't stop there. After the conversation, you anchor the expectations. You say, I hear you, I understand where you're at, and here's what needs to happen moving forward. That's the bridge between empathy and performance. Modern leadership also requires emotional agility. You have to be able to adapt your approach based on the person and the moment. Some people need encouragement, others need directness, some need space, others need more structure. Empathy is about knowing the difference and making intentional choices in how you lead. But again, none of that replaces performance standards. You're not doing anyone a favor by avoiding accountability. In fact, you're doing harm. When you lower expectations to protect someone's feelings, you communicate that you don't believe they're capable. That's not kindness, that's condescension. Real empathy says, I believe in you enough to be honest with you. I'm invested in your growth even if it's uncomfortable right now. High performers want to be held to a standard. They want feedback, they want to improve, and the best leaders deliver that feedback in a way that's human, direct, and constructive. Another myth is that empathetic leadership slows things down. That's false. In reality, when you build trust through empathy, you move faster. Why? Because people don't waste time guessing where they stand. They know what's expected. They know you'll be honest. They feel safe taking risks because they know you'll coach, not punish. That creates a culture of ownership, and ownership fuels speed. Leaders who master this balance are rare, but they build the strongest teams. They don't shy away from hard conversations, they lead with clarity and care. They don't micromanage or handhold, they empower and challenge. They're the kind of leaders people want to follow, not because they're soft, but because they're strong and supportive. You don't have to choose between results and relationships. The best leaders build both, and it starts with this belief: holding people accountable is an act of empathy. When you create an environment where people are seen, respected, and held to a high standard, you give them the opportunity to rise. And when they rise, the whole team wins. So if you want a high-performance team, lead with empathy and back it up with action. Be the leader who listens deeply, speaks clearly, and cares enough to expect more. Performance is not the enemy of empathy, it's the result of it when done right. Clear expectations are the foundation of high performance. If you don't set the standard, you can't expect people to meet it. It sounds obvious, but this is where so many leaders fail. They assume people know what good looks like. They believe they're being clear when they're actually being vague, and then they get frustrated when the results don't match their vision. But here's the truth: unclear expectations lead to inconsistent performance. Every single time, you can't hold people accountable to things you never articulated. You can't expect excellence if you never defined what excellence means in the context of your business, your team, your role. Clarity is leadership. Your job is to remove ambiguity. The more specific you are, the more likely people are to rise to the level you're asking for. And when you don't set that level clearly, you end up spending all your time correcting things that could have been prevented with one good conversation. Think about the last time someone on your team disappointed you. Now ask yourself, were your expectations actually clear? not just in your head, not just in a quick Slack message or a passing comment, but in a detailed, unmissable way. Did you explain the outcome you wanted, the timeline, the quality standard, and how you'd measure success? If not, you didn't give that person a fair shot, and that's on you as the leader. High performance starts with alignment, and alignment starts with clarity. When everyone on the team understands what the goal is, how their role contributes to it, and what winning looks like, they move faster, make better decisions, and stay focused. Clarity cuts down on confusion, duplication, and wasted time. It creates ownership, it creates confidence, and it gives you something objective to coach to when things fall short. Leaders often hesitate to set clear expectations because they think it feels controlling. But it's actually the opposite. When you're clear, you give people freedom, the freedom to perform without guessing. People want to do well, they want to know how to win. When you leave that undefined, you create anxiety and insecurity. That's when you get people constantly checking in, asking questions, and guessing themselves, not because they're incompetent, but because you weren't clear. This applies to everything from day-to-day tasks to big picture goals. If someone owns a project, they need to know exactly what success looks like. If you run a sales team, your reps need to know exactly what metrics matter and how they'll be evaluated. If you're building culture, your team needs to understand what behaviors are expected and what's non-negotiable. Without that, you're building on a shaky foundation, and don't confuse clarity with over-explaining or micromanaging. Clear expectations don't mean you're breathing down someone's neck. It means you're setting the target clearly so they can take full ownership of how they hit it. You're not taking away creativity, you're defining the playing field. People can't innovate or execute confidently if they don't know what the end zone looks like. When you have clear expectations in place, accountability becomes easy. Because now the standard isn't personal, it's known. You can say, "This isn't meeting the mark, here's why, and here's what needs to change." It removes emotion from the feedback. It makes performance conversations constructive instead of confrontational. That's what high-performing cultures are built on: clarity, consistency, and coaching. And remember, expectations aren't set it and forget it. They need to be repeated, reinforced, and refined over time. People forget, priorities shift, you grow. So should your standards. That's why great leaders don't just set expectations, they reset them often. In meetings, in ones in writing, in person. You reinforce the standard through repetition and example. If it matters, it should be visible and repeated. If your team isn't delivering the way you want them to, don't start with blame, start with clarity. Ask yourself, have I made the expectations unmistakable? Have I removed assumptions? Have I followed up to make sure we're aligned? Because when expectations are clear, accountability feels fair, performance improves, and trust deepens. That's how you build a team that moves fast, performs well, and doesn't burn out. Clarity is kindness, it's effectiveness, it's leadership. If you want a high-performance team, start by making the expectations so clear that no one can miss them. Then watch what happens. You don't get the culture you wish for, you get the one you reinforce. Every leader has an idea of what they want their culture to be: collaborative, accountable, high-performing, growth-oriented. But culture isn't built on intentions, values on a wall, or the inspirational speeches you give once a quarter. It's built in the micro decisions you make every single day. What you celebrate, what you tolerate, what you correct, and what you ignore, that's what creates culture. And whether you realize it or not, your team is always learning from you. They're learning from how you respond to a missed deadline, from whether you recognize the quiet top performer or only the loud one, from how you handle a toxic attitude that delivers results, from whether your actions actually match your words. That's where culture is formed, not in one big moment, but in the repetition of small signals over time. You can say we value excellence, but if you let low standards slide because someone's been here a long time, you're reinforcing something else entirely. This is why leaders need to be radically self-aware. You don't just set culture by what you say, you reinforce it by what you do. You're either shaping your culture with intention or you're drifting into one created by default. And the culture created by default is almost never the one you want. It's usually driven by the strongest personalities, not the highest standards. And when that happens, the loudest voice in the room becomes the culture, setter, not you. If you're constantly talking about performance but never holding people accountable, you're reinforcing a culture of excuses. If you reward urgency but not thoughtfulness, you're reinforcing chaos. If you value loyalty over results, you're reinforcing complacency. And if you claim to care about people but avoid tough conversations, you're reinforcing avoidance, not empathy. The culture you reinforce is not the one you hope for, it's the one you show up for over and over again. So, how do you actually reinforce the culture you do want? First, you need to be crystal clear about what that culture is, not vague values like integrity or teamwork. What does that look like in action? What behaviors support it? What does it sound like in meetings, in emails, in daily interactions? If you can't describe it, you can't reinforce it. Start by defining the behaviors that align with your culture and then go to work reinforcing those behaviors relentlessly. Reinforcement isn't just about calling people out when they get it wrong. In fact, the most powerful reinforcement is positive. Catch people doing the right thing, highlight it, name it, link it to your values. If someone goes above and beyond for a client, say, that's what ownership looks like. If someone gives tough but respectful feedback to a peer, say, that's the kind of collaboration we want more of. Reinforcement builds momentum and it tells your team, more of this, please. But don't just reward the behaviors that are easy to praise. You also have to be willing to address the ones that undermine your culture, even if they come from your highest performers, especially if they come from your highest performers. Because nothing will destroy a culture faster than a toxic person who's allowed to stay because they hit their numbers. The minute you allow someone to behave in a way that violates your culture, you send a message to your entire team that those values aren't real, they're optional. And this is where consistency matters most. One-time feedback doesn't shape culture. One-off recognition doesn't build culture. One team meeting with your vision doesn't drive change. What drives change is consistent reinforcement. Weekly check-ins, daily alignment, real-time course correction. Culture is a system, not a statement, and systems are only as strong as the people who lead them. So if your team feels off track, start by asking, what have I been reinforcing? What behaviors have I allowed? What conversations have I avoided? Where have I rewarded outcomes over values? Because your culture is always talking to you. It's in the engagement levels, the turnover, the quality of the work, the way people speak up or stay silent. You're already reinforcing something. The question is it what you want? You don't need more vision boards or offsites to build culture. You need courage, the courage to model the behavior, the courage to have hard conversations. The courage to be consistent. Culture isn't what you hope for, it's what you prove every single day. Modern leaders build teams, not dependents. That's a core shift in how leadership must operate today. In the past, leaders were expected to have all the answers. They were the gatekeepers of decisions, the fixers of problems, the heroes who stepped in when things went wrong. That kind of leadership may feel powerful, but it's not scalable. It creates bottlenecks, it creates burnout, and most importantly, it creates a team of people who are dependent on one person instead of empowered to lead themselves. Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about building a room full of people who are smarter, faster, more capable, and then equipping them to make decisions without you. The goal isn't to have a team that needs you constantly. The goal is to have a team that grows because of you. That's the difference between managing and leading. Managers keep things running. Leaders build people who can run things without them. If your team constantly comes to you for direction, approval, or next steps, that's not a sign of respect, that's a sign of dependency. And that dependency slows everything down. It means you're stuck in the weeds, pulled into tasks you shouldn't be doing, and unable to focus on the Leverage work that actually drives growth. It's not your team's fault, it's the culture you've reinforced. If you're always the answer, you're training people to stop thinking for themselves. Modern leadership demands something more: empowerment, delegation, and trust, but not blind trust earned trust, supported by systems. You don't just throw someone into the deep end and say, figure it out. That's not leadership either. You develop them, you coach them, you give them the tools, the training, and the feedback to step into ownership. And then you let go even if they don't do it exactly like you would. That's one of the hardest parts for high achieving leaders: releasing control, because control feels safe. It feels fast, but it's short-term thinking. The more you hold on to, the more you become the ceiling of your own team, and if everything has to go through you, you're not leading, you're limiting. Letting go doesn't mean stepping back from standards. It means stepping forward into leadership. It means saying, here's the outcome, here's what great looks like, now go own it, and I'll coach you through it, not carry it for you. Modern teams thrive when they're trusted, challenged, and supported. They don't want micromanagement. They want clarity, autonomy, and the opportunity to grow. Your job is to create the conditions where that growth can happen. That means giving people meaningful responsibility, not just tasks. It means letting them try, fail, learn, and come back stronger. It means building a culture where mistakes are coached, not punished, and where initiative is celebrated. The more you invest in building people, the more freedom you earn as a leader. Because now the team can function without you in every decision. Now your meetings aren't updates, they're strategy sessions. Now your people solve problems instead of reporting them. That's the mark of great leadership. When your team doesn't just follow you, they lead with you. Building leaders on your team isn't just about promotions, it's about mindset. It's about helping people see themselves as owners, not operators. Owners take responsibility, owners anticipate, owners don't wait for permission, they take initiative and ask for feedback. You create that by setting high standards and showing people how to reach them. You model what ownership looks like, you communicate with clarity, and you coach consistently. And yes, it takes more effort up front. It takes time to train someone properly. It takes patience to watch them work through challenges you could fix in 5 minutes. But that's the price of real leadership. You pay now, or you pay later in micromanagement, frustration, and stalled growth. Leaders who want to go far understand this. You scale through people, not around them. So ask yourself, am I building a team that depends on me, or a team that grows because of me? Do people on my team feel empowered to make decisions, or are they afraid to act without approval? Do I develop leaders, or do I just delegate tasks? The answers to these questions define the kind of culture you're reinforcing. Modern leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. That's how you build momentum. That's how you build trust, and that's how you build a team that outperforms even when you're not in the room. That's real leadership, scalable, sustainable, strong.